Hi, we're back. Thanks for joining us. For those of you just joining us right now, I'm Joe Ayala, and we're at the Open Bookstore at the Village in Woodland Hills.
30 seconds. It's a 30-second.
Okay, it's breaking. And I'm here talking with author Dan McCrory about his books, Capitalism Killed the Middle Class, 25 Ways the System's Rigged Against You, and his novel, You Will Forever Be My Always. Will you please read a segment of your...
Yes, I will. The English school was located on temple grounds just above the parking lot. The heat of the day gave the new asphalt a spongy feel to their walk. He was paying 30 baht to meet with the monk and pick through his metaphysical knowledge to answer his questions. The monk was Western looking despite his saffron robe, his hair closely cropped appropriately. I'm Henry, welcome to our temple. He gave Charlie a tour explaining the differences between the Buddhism practiced in Thailand with that of China and Japan, or the other countries that follow the teachings of Buddha. You know, he informed Charlie, they say there are 30,000 sutras or teachings, 30,000 possible interpretations of those teachings, leading to 30,000 sects of Buddhism. I was a Nichiren Buddhist in my teens, a Zen Buddhist in my 20s. Now here I am. So this is it, asked Charlie. This is the one. I don't know, 64 million Thais think so. I'm headed to Tibet next week. You guys, or rather those guys, believe in a heaven and a hell? There are basically 4 worlds. Hell with 8 levels. Then there's our world, 1 level. Then there are 6 levels of heaven and 16 levels in the place that's greater than heaven. Greater than heaven? I want to go there. You can't go there. Buddhism says there is no self, no soul. What? So there really isn't anything in it for me? There's like a little flame of you inside that has collected your karma from this existence and past existences to this current form. Will it still be you when you are gone? Theories differ, but the Theravada school says no. But on a good note, rebirth is immediate. So we skip heaven at that point and start over as what? We've got the 6 realms. You can return as a heavenly god, a demigod, a human, an animal, a ghost, or a creature of hell. Where you end up is all based on your karma. Eventually, it's hoped that each of us will reach nirvana. That's your ticket off the endless cycle of rebirth. And how do I get there? You have to stop your hunger and desire and follow the 8-fold path. You must learn to discipline your mind and body and practice mindfulness and meditation. How long does this take? For most, many lifetimes. But it's not me, right? It's my little flame. Very perceptive. You catch on quickly. Please don't feed my ego. The priest applauded his insight. Are you ready to join us, brother? The excited monk asked him. Thanks, but I've got a lot of desires to unload. After that, I have to achieve mindfulness and discipline. Then there's meditation, sitting for hours and looking inward. Isn't the urge to be a better human being just another way of clinging to desire? I've never looked at it that way before, said Harry in awe. Thanks, Henry. I hate to sound shallow, but I'm looking for a quicker fix. I'll try it your way next time. Try the Catholics, the monk shouted after him.
That's good. I love that. Where did this book come from? I mean, it seems very deep.
Well, it came from me finding out I had Parkinson's, and then we had the COVID lockdown, and all I could do was write. So this just poured out of me. My first book took 4 years. This book took 4 months.
Wow.
Because it was already there. The only thing I had to really do was research Muslim funerals, the prognosis of my disease, and what it could look like down the road, and all of those things were incorporated into the book. So, if anybody is concerned that they got something called a resting tremor, or they're having any kind of problems that nobody can explain, they might want to go to a neurologist and check that out, because there's all sorts of possibilities out there, and none of them are too good. So.
With so much of your personal stories wrapped up in this book, I mean, do people think it's about you?
Oh, I get a lot of that. People think that because I have Parkinson's, and this guy has Parkinson's, and everything else in the book is all about me. But I will grant you that in most cases, writers put a little bit of themselves in there, and I grant that that's part of me in there, but the whole thing is not me. There are people in the book that I've never met and wouldn't mind meeting someday, but I know they're out there somewhere. I just didn't just make them up. I mean, I did just, excuse me. I did make them up, but it's based on realities of people that are already out there. So, does that make sense?
It makes sense.
Okay.
I understand this book is in the audiobook format. Do you do your own narration or do somebody else do it for you?
A guy named John Moe, very talented man, narrated my book, and you could buy the book and buy the audio book, and they're two different experiences. But he seemed to get into my mind and know a lot of what I was trying to convey. He was nice enough to call the book profound, so I think that's a good thing. I'm not sure.
Yeah, absolutely.
And he does a bang up job, so I really recommend it. You'll forever be my always, as narrated by John Moe.
So, I mean, what's harder to write though, not nonfiction or a novel?
In my case, nonfiction was easier to write because I knew the stuff that was in the book. I had experienced it all, and it was based on things that I've been trained to know about. But the novel is you create your own world, and you put the people in it that so you can move around like chess pieces, and it's almost like playing God a little bit, because this is your world and these are your people, and what happens to them is all up to you.
Exactly. When you're making up all of that stuff.
Exactly.
There's a lot of sex in those pages of Forever Be My Always. Was that really necessary?
Well, most of the stuff in there that's sex has a reason for it. Most of the major transitions, the conversations are sexually motivated. I use sex to show how callous and immoral Charlie Wise is in the beginning. I use sex at first to show how it controls his life and his motivations. I use sex to show the transformation that Charlie makes to nice guy. And I use sex to show how Charlie has old-fashioned notions about sex. So the reason I put it in there is because it adds a certain rawness to the book, but it's a lot of people tell me that it feels real. So that's really important.
It felt real to me. I read it. What about all the religious conflict? Is that true?
Yes, I that was again research. I had to research a funeral. I talked to a friend of mine, Brahim, who's named in the book. He's the only real person in the book. And I asked him about being a Muslim, and he answered all my questions. And the other stuff I had to research, and it's all based on stuff that I found out there on the internet, and we know the internet never lies. So.
Of course, no, never. Would you be so gracious as to read a little more of your book?
Sure, thanks.
Thank you.
Charlie found a Catholic church in the middle of Bangkok, something of a historical artifact from Western civilization, a stiff, austere building that stood out among the great white Buddhist temples, still busy and still listening to the congregation's confessions. Charlie stayed up at the Asian-looking priest and the Asian-looking Jesus nailed to the cross as he approached a young-looking Thai priest. Another Jew crying, "Why me, God?" Excuse me, do you have anyone who speaks English? I do. Can you take my confession? Well, first of all, we don't take your confessions, not dictation. We receive your confession on God's behalf. The young priest looked him over. You're not Catholic. Why are you here? Like everyone else, Father, I'm looking for an answer. Why am I here? That sort of thing. That and so much more. How much time do you have? That's the question in the foremost of my mind. You're not going to find answers on a 2-week vacation, or maybe you will. Who am I to say? If you're going to be vague and cryptic, Father, neither of us will get much out of this conversation. The priest gestured to the confessional. Perhaps it's time to determine a course. They stepped inside their respective compartments. The priest slid the window open. Bless me, Father, for I have sinned. How so? I have lied, cheated, fornicated out of wedlock, blasphemed, damn it, concentrated daily. Tell me, son, do you understand the concept of penance? I think so. I regret the bad shit I've done and will make it up somehow. Very good. Do you understand the concept of sinning? Because it seems to me you're unclear of what it means to sin. Bad things that violate the Ten Commandments. Son, what faith were you born into? Jewish, not really a practicing Jew, just sort of Jewish. Are you attached to a synagogue, a rabbi, somebody who can explain things in a way that speaks to you? They're not there for me, Father. I'm the bad guy. Nonsense. Satan is the bad guy. You're just somebody who's searching for the truth. Does the truth exist, Father? Just between you and me, fuck if I know. I'm just a Jesuit trying to get to heaven. Thoreau said, one world at a time. You may not find the answer, but you may find something that resonates with you, that provides you solace in the middle of the night or death's door. But am I really Jewish? Just because I was born into the religion, surrounded by the culture, will it save my rotten soul? Are you a Yankee fan because you grew up in the Bronx? Are you a Republican because you were raised that way? The priest exited the vestibule and continued the conversation. Somewhere along the line, we must define ourselves, figure out our moral code. Some of us carry on in the family tradition, content in our inherited convictions, never questioning our faith, never considering the possibility of a separate, equally true religion. He clasped Charlie on the shoulder, trying to convey compassion. Peace be with you, brother. May your quest for answers yield results and fill your soul and erase any doubt. May it bring you solace. Thanks, Father. Not the answer, but an answer nonetheless. See you in the next life, the priest said with a wink.
I love that one. What are people speaking of? What have people said about this book?
Well, as you mentioned before, there's a lot of sex in it, and some people are uncomfortable with that, and other people seem to wallow in it. They love that there's titillation in there, but it's done in a way that people seem to gravitate towards. I entered in a contest called the Los Angeles Book Festival, and I received an award for it. I entered in the category called Wild Card, not because it's wild, but because it defines a genre.
Right.
I think.
Okay.
Yes, it's in several categories or none at all. Yes. So that's kind of the response I've been getting.
Okay.
And I was asked if I wanted to turn it into a movie, and nothing went anywhere with that. But I'm still waiting.
It sounds like a movie in the making.
Thanks.
Let's take another quick 15-minute break. We'll be back with pieces of works in progress and a conversation about the writing process with author Dan McCrory.
Do you think we're taking too many breaks?
No, there's never too many breaks.
Okay. Thanks. I hope to talk to you soon.
Okay, we're back. We're talking with author Dan McCrory about his books, present and future. How many books do you see, Dan? What kind of books do you see in your future?
Well, I've got two already, and let's see, a couple of nonfiction, a couple of more novels in me, and a whole series of fantasy series I'm working on too. So, thank you for being here.
A book about music. About a book?
Classical music.
Awesome.
Try to discover new music.
Okay.
We're
I
live.
will give you a call. We need to get together for lunch. Well, most of the time.
Okay.
Absolutely.
I know where you live.
Uh,
We can't hide.
yeah,
Well,
let's get together.
we're doing a live interview right now, so thank you for stopping in.
Thank
I'll
you.
talk to you soon. Have a
Thank
great day.
See you, Stuart. Thank you. That was Stuart Randall, the chief engineer for radio station KPFK.
I see what kind of books you see, what kind of books do you see
Ah,
in the
yes.
future.
I told you
Yeah,
that.
yeah.
Yes.
I hear there's been some good buzz in your next novel, Moroccan Sunset. What's the premise of that book?
It's about a man and a woman, as most stories are.
Yes.
And but she's slightly older than him, and she's an heir to a shoe fortune, and she's on the freeway breaking up with him when she dies in a crash.
Oh no.
And so he had made a promise a couple of years prior to that they would one day end up back in Morocco, and he would renovate a traditional building in Morocco called a riad for her. And when he gets this surprise check, he decides that's exactly what he's going to do. So he goes to Morocco and he finds out the person he thought he knew was that the person they knew, because she had gone there after the death of her father for a month by herself.
Right, right.
And these people had taken her under their wing and taught her a side of Morocco that tourists probably never ever see.
Right. Been to Morocco.
In the Morocco twice.
Right, right.
Yeah.
I remember you sent me pictures from there, and I was very jealous that you were
Yeah.
there. Could you share some of the story with us?
Sure, a little bit. David awoke half expecting the weather to reflect his somber mood, but it was LA, and the sunlight was annoyingly bright as usual. Today he would say goodbye to the longest relationship he had ever had, and a woman who had broadened his horizons and awakened new passions, travel, art, and the theater. Did he still love her? Yes, but now those feelings are wrapped up in a host of memories and emotions that would take years to unravel in solitary reflection. Maria was dressed for services, but still made them huevos rancheros and Mexican coffee. She gave David a warm embrace and stood back to look him in the eye. Whatever happens, David, I will always be your friend. It was you who made me feel like a part of the family. What's going on, Maria? Are you planning to go somewhere? Who knows what is in the future, she answered cryptically. We'd better go, said Kirk. We still have to stop by my place for my suit. Do you need a ride, Maria? My sister is driving, she answered. Afterward, we go to the church. Okay, said Kirk. We'll see you there. David wasn't ready to let go of the weird vibe she had given him. Can we talk later, Maria? Sure, she said, patting his arm. The services had already begun when they crept into the dark entryway of the funeral home, trying to make out a vacant seat. The place was packed. Debbie stood up near the front and walked down the aisle to retrieve him. Hi, Kirk. Sorry for your loss, he murmured. She nodded. You should be sitting up front with us, David. He followed Debbie to the front row where Lydia's family, Debbie, her mom, Rita, her brother, James, Uncle Bob, and his wife, Alice, all shifted to the left to open up a seat for him on the aisle. Rita offered him a quick glare. The minister was not familiar to him, so he probably hadn't known Lydia. He seemed to be most acquainted with Bob and Alice, but he was kind. Lydia was a diamond, a multifaceted gem, priceless and without equal. She was taken from us much too soon. Let us pray. David glanced down at his program. Lydia Watson, 1976 to 2021, survived by mother Rita, sister Deborah, and brother James. Like Bob and Alice, he hadn't made the cut. The lady at the piano sang and accompanied herself on Amazing Grace. The last chords faded away. The silence was broken only by someone in the back clearing his throat. David was restless. He didn't feel he belonged here. He wanted to seek out friendly faces, but sitting in the front row did not afford him that ability. He belonged in the back, so he could be the first one out the door and away from this scene that made his heart ache. The Reverend launched into a long, melancholy sermon that was more about saving souls than about one particular soul. He knew Lydia would have preferred not to share the spotlight with any other sinners. It was her day, after all. The pianist played Just As I Am, a hymnal he recognized from his own Holy Roller past, a Come to Jesus number that seems somehow as appropriate here as a Southern Baptist tent revival. The minister gave a final benediction and then announced, after we lay Lydia to rest at the gravesite, you were all invited to the home of her mother, Rita Watson, for the celebration of Lydia's life. Both he and Rita were brought to the front of the room to be greeted by those in attendance. At last, he was seeing familiar faces. There was Maria with her wonderful hugs, Anita and Janice, the lesbian couple who Lydia had introduced to each other. There was Jeffrey, the minor celebrity due to the wide play of his HIV commercial, and Stefan, someone who was a leftover from a prior existence, pre-David. In 15 minutes, everyone shuffled out and was gone. Rita turned to him. See you at the house? Are you sure you want me there, Rita? She seemed to look into his soul. Don't be silly, David. He and Kirk parked with many of the others just out the open gate leading to the house. Lydia always called this place the Imperial Palace of the Ice Queen. Sounds like she had mommy issues. They were very competitive. I think her mom resented that Uncle Shelley left the shoe business to her. Shelley was a man? Family secret. He liked to wear women's shoes. Knew all about them. I can't believe you never told me that before. They were almost to the door. Kirk looked at him. Are you ready for this? David shrugged and walked in. The same 300 at the services seemed to have arrived and brought reinforcements. The caterer had a bar set up by the pool. It was too hot to be outside. The only kind of suits that should be out in this heat are birthday suits, bathing suits, and lawsuits, James said as he walked up. Drink, he handed them both martinis, and of Lydia's favorite libation. How are you, James? Still chasing ambulances? David asked, and looking out for overage and overweight gigolos like yourself. They hugged each other while Kirk looked on astonished. I was worried you guys were going to brawl right here. It's all in good fun, said James, and turned back to David. And I'd watch your back. Maria walked up to him with a tray of hors d'oeuvres. You're working, David asked. 35 an hour, yes. Wait a minute, don't you still work for me? David, I never worked for you, only Miss Lydia. Mrs. Watson fired me there and hired me here. Any objections he might have made were cut off with the screech of a microphone. Thank you all for coming, Rita announced. Lydia is smiling down on us, probably a little disappointed she couldn't be here in the flesh. We're here to give her a proper send-off, so you're all invited to come up here and share your best, your funniest, your most poignant Lydia story with the rest of us. I'll go first. Lydia was the oldest. At the age of 2, she was already bossing around her baby brother and her parents. She was stubborn and would scream at the top of her lungs at any small injustice. I guess some people never change. A nervous titter swept the crowd. A short, bald man approached the mic and pulled it toward him. Hi, I'm Bill. He seemed to slur a little bit and swayed noticeably. Lydia was my boss. When things were going great, she was my best friend. When one little thing goes wrong, Rita was suddenly there beside Bill, relieving him with the microphone. Poor Bill. Lydia's passing seems to have hit him hard. She looked at a sea of faces. Can someone please call this poor man an Uber? Someone from catering pulled him toward the house. Debbie took the mic. Lydia was my big sister. She taught me how to match outfits, depending on the occasion. She taught me how to be nice, but firm. When I was at Stanford, she drove to the coast to see me on my birthday. We had the best day doing whatever I wanted. I would give anything to have another day like that, just one more time. She started to wipe her eyes as she talked. Lydia, I love you. I miss you already. Thank you for being my big sister. A few in the crowd brushed away tears.
You know, in spite of the shoes, the man wearing shoes, it seems like a very tame book compared to For Everything I Always.
Oh yeah, definitely. We don't explore the sexual side of either of the main characters hardly at all. Well, there's always a little bit, yeah.
When do you expect to publish this book?
Sometime this year. I'm getting tired of publishing my own books, paying for it out of my pocket. So I recently found a publisher that's willing to publish pretty much anything I want to put out there, which is really helpful.
Is that Simon and Schuster? Is that who you signed with?
I wish. I'll tell you the truth. I didn't tell you the name of the company.
Oh.
But it wasn't Simon and Schuster. Simon and Schuster, there's 5 big companies left that do have big publishers, and they're being really picky these days. All right.
Hello.
So, no, I'll stick with the little guys because you get better treatment.
The smaller houses,
Yeah.
they're closer. And they have better customer service.
That's true.
Just like almost every business.
That's true. Yeah.
What's the hardest thing about publishing a book these days?
The hardest part is having a platform because even the big 5 want you to have a platform. So that means you put out a monthly newsletter. I do that. You get on podcasts. I've done about 50 of those. And you have a real presence on the internet, the social media. I've got over 60 TikTok videos describing things in my first book and giving a little taste like this to people that are subscribing to my TikTok. And if they want to be on the newsletter, we'll talk about that later.
Yeah, I'm amazed you're on TikTok. Actually, I mean, I'm barely on it, and it's amazing that you've got so much. You're so prolific on that platform.
Well, it's more for younger people, obviously,
Yeah.
but yeah, it's given a real boost. I've got 268 faithful followers, and on some of my videos, I've received over 1,300 views. So
Wow,
people are looking at my stuff. That's good.
it shows.
That's what it's there for.
That's amazing. That's amazing. Well, I'm here with author Dan McCrory. Again, my name is Joe Ayala, and we're going to take another little 15-minute break and talk more about his published and soon to be published works.
Thank you.
Join us in 15 minutes.
Thanks.
I'm back. We're back. I'm here with the author Dan McCrory at the Open Book Bookstore in Woodland Hills. The whole chain of open bookstores supports independent authors and gives them a space to share their creations. Turn off the TV and read a book. That's what I always say. Dan, I understand you were published in the 2020 anthology of California's Best Emerging Poets. Are you the real thing?
I'm more of a poet, fake poet.
A poet laureate.
There you go,
Yes. Would you grace us with a couple of poems, please?
Okay, here it goes.
What do you got?
Well, first I'll start off with my poem Poetry. What manner of poetry is this, where nothing rhymes or meters or rhymes? It's a slapdash hit or miss. It's the poetry for our times. It's stupid and insipid and insincere, with a thin veneer of nice. I think I've made it very clear. This poetry lacks some spice. Emily Dickinson, Arise from Your Grave. E. Cummings and Robert Frost, for sure. Pithy words and phrases over which they slave, undone by crap that will never endure. It's true, some of this junk resembles real poetry in traditional form. It's like the poet, tools assembled, could not inspire or couldn't perform. So if you're a poet, but you're not, and you think you can wax with art, it's unfortunate that you forgot that poetry is only poetry in part. That's poetry.
That's poetry.
And I got a couple of haiku for you. Why not haiku? Sure, why not haiku? You can stick words together and they might make sense. Next one's called Not Another Haiku. Not one more haiku, stupid form of poetry, short and confusing.
Oh my God, poetry's hard.
Yes, yep, it is.
You, I was just talking to you about the slam poetry and how, it's basically you speak in a certain intonation. That's what slam poetry is. It is, at least that is to me.
It is, yeah.
But what's the hardest thing about poetry to do?
Knowing who's going to appreciate it, because everybody's got poems in them, and they write them, and they often don't rhyme. We can thank Ron McEwen back in the '60s
Sure.
for that, but a lot of people think they're writing poetry, and frankly, nobody else seems to think so. So poetry is a tough sell.
I think all art is a tough sell. Yes, it's also so subjective, don't you think? I mean,
That's true.
It's not really based on what all the effort you put into something like that. It's really, at the end of the day, you're at the whim of the reader or the viewer. If it's a movie, if it's a book, if it's a poem, it's the people that are reading it or watching it that you're kind of at the mercy of.
That's very true.
Does one type of writing influence others? I mean, how do you?
I think so. I think by writing poetry, no matter how bad it is or how good it is, it learns you. It sets you up for knowing what really creates images, what really and gets you to compact your words so that they have more power to them. So rather than using these loosey-goosey words, you like saying the guy's ugly, you can say people turned and screamed when they saw him. That's much more effective.
It's like a metaphorical style.
Yes, exactly.
You entered a few screenwriting competitions, I heard.
Yes, I've got two scripts that I submitted to something called the New York City International Screenplay Awards, and they both achieved quarterfinalist status, which means they're in the top 1/3. And quarterfinalists often get actually made into movies.
Interesting.
So I'm hoping that I've turned my book, You'll Forever Be My Always, into a couple of different scripts. I was trying to decide whether we were going to do a 2-hour feature, but you lose so much of the characters that make the story what it is. So I also created a 4-hour, 4-part miniseries. Whatever, 4-part here.
Interesting.
So,
Well, I know how you did. But what are the scripts about?
one of them's called Bubblegum Summers, and it's about a family. The father is on his way up in the TV industry in the 1960s, right?
Right.
And they have a son named Lance, and there's this other family that's she's like Sophia Loren. She's a famous Italian film actress. Her career is on the downslide. They have a daughter named Sophia. So Sophia and Lance fall in love, but then the two main actors of the families decide they're gonna have an affair, and the kids catch on to it, and they they realize that the only way they're going to save their respective families is by stopping seeing each other. And the other one is a children's animated feature based on Legends of the Bahamas called Cuckoo Soup. And
Cuckoo soup.
Cuckoo Soup. So
Interesting. Well, let's see. You've got all these different styles of writing. You've got book writing, novel, nonfiction, poetry, screenplays. I mean, what else is there?
I'll let you know when I find it out. Yeah, there's writing is entering into realms that never existed before. And for instance, my book, For Be My Always, has actually been turned into a audio book. So there's going to be other ways coming down the pipe soon that you can take those and put them into a different kind of venue. So I'm looking forward to exploring those possibilities.
Well, getting back to books, I hear you and Charles Dickens have something in common.
Do you remember the book Pickwick Papers by Charles Dickens?
Yes.
He realized that to gain more readers, he needed to get their attention. So he did something that was, excuse the pun, novel at the time. He published chapter by chapter in a magazine so that people would have to buy the magazine to find out the next chapter. So I tried that with a book I'm working on also. It's called Worst Case Scenario Election Night 2020. It's about President Trump declaring a martial law, and the American Indians decided that they're going to take their country back. So what I did was I started this in September 2019. I started publishing pieces of this, and it was on about 3 different Facebook pages. And when things started getting really crazy, I realized I couldn't possibly come up with anything that was crazier than reality. So I kind of put the book on the back burner. So I'm finishing that up now because of things that might be happening soon.
Well, yeah, you never know. I mean, that's one of those cases of art not imitating life, but life imitating art.
Yeah.
Yeah.
In this case, art and life we've been talking.
You're very similar, yes. I think I asked you this question. The title sounds intriguing. Can you tell us more? What's about the specific book?
Oh yeah, I actually could. I don't know if I put that now or
We can take a break and come back to it in 15 minutes if you want. We can. We do have one more break, I think, scheduled.
Oh, you got me. Let's see.
I do think you do. Yeah. Get a break right here.
Okay, so am I reading there?
Yeah, you're gonna be reading. Hey, how you doing? Good. Yes, we're reading
Yes.
right now.
Oh yeah, I put it there.
So you got a little more.
Yeah, okay, let's go ahead and take a break.
Yeah, let's take one more break. We'll be back in another 15 minutes with author Dan McCrory and reading some more of his works for us.
Thank you.
Here I am. Okay. Welcome back, everybody. We're here with author Dan McCrory talking about his many works that he's written and soon to be published and have already been published. But before we left, Dan, you were going to read us an excerpt from your book, Worst Case Scenario, Election Night 2020. Could you?
Yeah,
us, please?
sure. Mr. President, Jared was excited. It was refreshing to see something other than a sneer on that face. Commander, Trump corrected. Okay, as you know, I've been writing reconnaissance with the Heavens Devils militia, that Bible thumping biker gang. Yeah, we were going through Virginia, firing up our civilian troops, and we found one compound that was smoldering ash, about 30 dead. But here's the interesting part. That would be the part that interests me. Almost all of them were killed by arrows. The Indians, that's what the people in the area claimed. Stupid, very stupid. All right, let's nuke their reservation. Let me remind you that fallout around the area might kill 1,000 of your voters. It doesn't matter. I declare martial law due to campaign fraud. I win. Oh, but you're going to need a new volunteer army, said Jared. I already have an army. I hear there's been some downsizing. They're shooting the deserters. I appreciate the heads up. We need you out there. You're doing a great service for your country. First, I'd like to wash up, eat some decent food, and spend some time with Ivanka. Fine, but hurry. You know we can't count on the lamestream media to tell us what's really going on out there. I'm going to shut down social media except for my Twitter account, so the nation hears the truth directly from me. You don't think Ivanka and I, Trump made eye contact directly from me. Jared tossed off a frustrated salute on his way to the door. I'll be heading out again in 2 hours. The receptionist came bustling in as Kushner left. Mr. Modi is calling from India to congratulate you, sir. More Indians, Trump mused. What's his first name? Narendra? Fuck that. Modi it is. All right, patch him through. So that was,
I love it. I love it. That's great. That's very funny. And it's hard to get humor on paper if you're not, if most people can write it and it mostly falls flat. That was actually very fun.
thank you.
What about nonfiction? Anything you have coming up?
I've actually written, I'm starting to write a book with the youngest daughter of Leonard Peltier. For those who don't remember, Leonard Peltier was an American Indian who was arrested and convicted for the murder of 2 FBI agents in 1977. He's been in prison since then, and it's a travesty because the FBI built this fictitious case against him, and he's been sitting there, and he's getting older and sicker, and he wants to come home. And so Kathy and I are putting together this book, and we're hoping to show that he's just a regular guy. He's not this cold-hearted killer that people may think he is. He's a family man, and the generations of his family have gotten older and pass on in some cases, not knowing if he was ever going to see the light of day again. So yeah, there's a book. That book is called "The Family He Left Behind."
Could you read a little bit of that book first, please?
Sure. This is another work in progress, and this is chapter 1. The first time my dad saw me was at his trial in Fargo, North Dakota in 1977 for the murder of 2 FBI agents at Pine Ridge Reservation, said Kathy Pelcher. I was almost 2 years old, and he held me for just a minute before he had to hand me back to my mother. Never married, they separated before I was born. I was the final note, the last reminder of better days. I don't really have a personal relationship with my dad because from the time I was born, he has been behind bars. I don't know what kind of relationship we would have had because my folks had already gone their separate ways, but maybe we would have been closer because I had spent my entire life asking, pleading, demanding the government to let him come home. There was no indication that Leonard Peltier was a son of the res, a warrior for the people, though he was born at the Turtle Mountain Indian Reservation in North Dakota in 1944, number 11 of 13 children. Maybe his militancy grew out of his indoctrination at the Wapitan Indian School, a boarding school like so many others run by the Bureau of Indian Affairs, Indian Education, denied his culture and its rite of passage, forced to assimilate. After 9 years living 150 miles from home, he wasn't interested in the Flandreau Indian School in South Dakota, never graduating, relying on his GED later in life to land a decent job. Nothing in that background predicted he would one day be an activist or accused and convicted of aiding and abetting murder. Leonard moved to Seattle in '65, at the age of 21, working construction jobs and eventually co-owned an auto shop when he found himself drawn into the cause. Upstairs, they ran a halfway house for Native Americans dealing with drug and alcohol issues, and with the formerly incarcerated who were trying to merge back into American society. Being Leonard's oldest son, said Chauncey, I was with him off and on before he went to prison. I actually was up in the Seattle, Tacoma area when they caravanned over there. Seattle was one of 3 locations on the West Coast, the other 2 being LA and San Francisco, that originated the Trail of Broken Treaties caravan and march on Washington in 1972. Out of all the kids, I'll probably say I've been with him the most before he went in, said Chauncey. So does that mean you're still close to him, I asked? Well, no, me and my father don't know each other anymore. I went probably 25 years one time without visiting. The first Indian atrocities Kathy learned about started with the Mankato killings of 1862, known as the Dakota 38+2. Trials for 498 Dakota men for raids on settlers' villages were held with no representation, with language barriers in some cases, and no time to prepare. It was said and researched the young chief was hung on order of Abraham Lincoln. The reality was much worse. Abraham Lincoln, in the midst of the Civil War, personally approved a list of 38 Dakota men. Where did it go? Dakota men be hung for the Dakota War of 1862. And on the day after Christmas, they were hanged in the largest mass execution in American history, as were two who were later caught. It's a generational trauma and rights our people fought for, not just in the 60s or 70s. Fighting for our rights has been since the white man came to what we call Turtle Island. Treaties made to keep peace with the outsiders are constantly broken. Native Americans' anger and frustration reached a tipping point in 1968 against our U.S. government oppressors. Activist Russell Means, Dennis Banks, and others called for a pro-Indian civil rights organization, the American Indian Movement. Dad was just 24 years old at the time, and he was energized by this war cry to name all the injustices and broken treaties perpetrated by the U.S. government. Leonard, however, was just beginning a family, so he stood on the sidelines for several years until he realized the U.S. government was not moving to right wrongs or address issues that could be traced back a century or more before. Acts of injustice against Native Americans continue, a little quieter, a little more subtle. The FBI in the late 60s to early 70s operated out of a sense of paranoia generated by one man, J. Edgar Hoover. Hoover's counterintelligence program, or COINTELPRO, from 1956 to 1971, infiltrated and kept records on every major movement or individual that met their interpretation of the word subversive. The subject of its illegal and covert surveillance ranged from the Black Panthers, the American Indian Movement, and charismatic leaders like Malcolm X, Reverend Martin Luther King, and John Lennon. Times were tense as the country reached a moral crossroads and actively fought in the streets to stop the war in Vietnam.
It's a powerful, seems like a powerful book. And Kathy's been contributing a lot to that as far as background information. And you've done a lot of research, obviously.
Yeah, I've done some research, but a lot of his the future success of this book is writing on Kathy's family, because I want to talk to Leonard's children, his former spouses, his grandchildren, all the people that have been affected, generations have been affected by the fact that he has not been a presence in their family and in their lives. So I'm trying to show that how this has made the whole family they're all victims of this whole thing perpetrated by the FBI and the U.S. government.
Yeah, they're part of the big. I agree with that completely. I think that what this government has done to the Native Americans in this country is an atrocity, to say the least. And not just here, but in every and not just our country, obviously, but certainly we should take ownership of the damage that we've done to our native tribes.
Yeah. And we're constantly in their face about it. I mean, look at Mount Rushmore.
I know.
That's our Indian land.
I can imagine.
Yeah.
Well, we just did that recently when we had the pipeline
Exactly.
incident over there. So that's another example of the government
Yeah.
saying, we don't care what we've done to you in the past. We're going to continue to do that. And they've been doing that. So it's
Exactly.
unfortunate. What about the sequels to the capitalism book? What else do you have going on there?
Let's see. I read a little bit about Rebuilding Union, and
Right.
I've also got this one that's Capitalism, the Global Edition. I could read a little bit from that if you wish.
Absolutely, please do.
Oh,
Get 7%.
okay. My wife and I love to travel, and lately I've been carrying a copy of my book, Capitalism Killed the Middle Class, 25 Ways the System is Rigged Against You, in my carry-on, ready to discuss the pitfalls and advantages of American capitalism with anybody and everybody. Where can I find this book in Italian, Arabic, Thai? I'm asked. We face the same situation. After speaking with friends from these and other countries, I do find a lot in common. Inequality prevails in most of the countries of the world, despite the dominant monetary system, the type of government, or levels of oppression. We have also seen a move towards totalitarian fascism. India, Russia, Hungary, the Philippines, Brazil, and dare I say it, the United States. If justice prevails, Narendra Modi, Vladimir Putin, Janos Adair, Rodrigo Duterte, Jair Bolsonaro, and Donald Trump will have to answer to the world community someday. We won't discuss those countries nor their leaders in this book. Too often, inequality is framed around economics, fed and measured by the notion that making money is the most important thing in life, reports from Steiner, administrator of the United Nations Development Program in their 2019 report. This is a report they put out every year through the United Nations. The societies are creaking into the strain of this assumption, and while people may protest to keep pennies in their pockets, power is the protagonist of this story. The power of the few, the powerlessness of many, and collective power of the people to demand change. The true measure of dissatisfaction with the status quo could be identified by an uprising, an open act of resistance, a rebellion, or revolt. What sparks a revolt? Strikes, and general strikes especially, indicate that economic conditions, everything that allows a person to live a life without want, are not meeting some basic needs, and folks are suffering. At this point, they're not beginning to suffer. It's gone on a while and has escalated from someone else's problem to mine. A critical mass must be reached before desperation turns into anger, and anger hits the streets. There have been over 80 uprisings since 2000.
I know we didn't have it scripted to do, Dan, but I think we're gonna have to take another break to give your phone time to charge, so we can have, so we won't get cut off in mid sentence.
That's a good idea. And stay tuned, everybody. Thanks for hanging in there.
We'll be back in about 15 minutes, guys.
Thank you.
Hi, everyone. I'm Joe Ayala. I'm back here with author Dan McCrory, a good friend of mine and an incredibly talented writer. We were talking, before we left for the break, you were talking about, you're reading an excerpt from your book, Capitalism, the sequel to Capitalism. And you had something else you wanted to share with us. It was a study guide.
I'm actually looking for groups to put my book through the paces. Capitalism Killed the Middle Class, and I've written a study guide that goes with it. And what I'm hoping to do is get together 10 or 20 political activists, 10 or 20 labor activists, and some students, and have them interview each other about stuff in the book, so we can maybe find a way to train them without making it feel like it's training.
Sure, make it fun.
Make it, yeah, for the next generation of workers.
I'm working on that in my local as well, actually. It's
very
good
good.
that you're doing that. You had to think about the Rebuilding Union, the book you wrote, Rebuilding Union, and you said I think so. That may be the name of the radio program. Is that right?
Yes, originally a couple of summers ago, I did a webinar called Building Union, and I asked 3 questions, which I've asked in Rebuilding Union, the book. And it's what is labor doing right? What is labor doing wrong? And how can we attract more people into the labor movement? On KPFK radio station, we are now putting together a labor program, and we decided to go with the title Rebuilding Union, and again ask those 3 questions in the interviews that we do. So hopefully it'll regenerate the labor movement and discussion about things that people may not necessarily feel comfortable discussing, like the history of racism, history of sexism in the labor movement. But by examining those subjects, we can make the labor movement a better organization for everybody.
Absolutely. I'm very proud to be attached to that project. I'm hoping that it takes off. It seems like a great avenue to be able to actually get the word of labor out to let them know that it's part of that. We're part of them as well. So,
Exactly.
And one more nonfiction.
No.
Something called
The global edition.
Global Edition.
We talked about that, and global edition. And it's got a lot of numbers in it, and it's probably going to be for people that are really, really into numbers and labor, because it's for more labor leaders, because it allows them to what I've done is I've compared countries like Canada, France, Morocco, Thailand, and the way they treat their working class, and to see how it reflects on the global market, to see if there is some kind of connection there. So,
Okay. I mean, all this, you're doing a lot. Needless to say, I mean, this should keep all of this stuff keeps you pretty busy.
It does.
There's a lot going on there. Do you have any surprises for us coming up?
Oh, surprises is we get these things printed. Back, I'm even now working on a fantasy series of fantasy books that I came up with involving swords.
Oh, right, the Swords of San Simeon, is that what that's
The
called?
7 swords.
The
of San
Seven
Simeon.
Swords of San Simeon.
Yes.
I mean, is it too early to get a glimpse of that book, or is it?
I've got a little bit. I haven't gotten too far with it yet, but it's something I've always enjoyed reading myself. Lord of the Rings, that kind of stuff.
Sure.
And so when I started, has a little bit of reality to an otherwise fantasy story. So the only told
I'd love, yeah, absolutely.
from the 7 swords of San Simeon. He wasn't sure he had arrived in the right moment of time, but he was driven to push forward. Where there was a castle in the 20th century, there was a barren hill at this time. He was early, but how early? He was Japanese. Would it draw attention and make what he had to do even more difficult? William Randolph Hearst was a special breed of arse, stubborn and unyielding as a brick wall. It often proved impossible to move him on a Sunday. It was the fall of 1919, when we were all mulling over lessons learned from the Great War, that he informed his staff he was moving to California to spend more time with his paramour, actress Marion Davies. All of us on staff were taken with Miss Davies' quick wit and sharp mind. She could hold her own when discussing world affairs with Mr. Hearst without the ownership and collective input from some of the most brilliant muckrakers Mr. Hearst had hired to inform this debate. Actresses from both before her time had built a reputation as vacuous magpies, intent on mimicking the lives of real people. So they were caught unaware when engaging with Miss Davies in serious issues of the day. It was 1919 and no one gave much notice to someone who looked like their gardener. The Japanese of that era were quiet and circumspect, but artisans of their vocation. It was a generation long before thoughts of bombing Pearl Harbor entered into consideration. Yet Kotaro wielded the sword of Usanagi, the sword of time. Long before he made himself known to the protector of the realm, Kotaro observed Mr. Hearst, maybe at times wondering why this spoiled rich man was so intent on following their plan to the possible death of one or perhaps all of them. The publisher was full of himself, but though never expressed it, swelled with pride in the slight of a girl impressed everyone around him. She was not at all like any of the characters she played in the movies. Just a year before Mr. Hearst fed up with the cutthroat politics of New York, was on a visit to California when he first glimpsed Miss Davy on stage in the Ziegfeld Follies. He was already considering a move into the motion picture business when he was smitten by the vivacious and personable 19-year-old Marion. At the time, she was escorted about Hollywood by Mr. Paul LeBlanc, ruthless publisher of the New York Star Eagle and the Detroit Journal. He didn't seem to mind when his longtime mistress jumped ship. I'm still doing business with Bill, and he's making me rich. I consider the trade more than fair, Block confessed to a friend. He was baffled why a looker like Davies would jilt him for the pompous aging William Randolph Hearst, but thousands he was raking in made it easy to forget how quickly she had left his side. William was in the bedchambers, preparing to sleep off a soggy typhoon into its screaming when he realized his Japanese manservant had followed him into the toilet. Hearst had his head in the commode when Kotaro approached. Hearst turned to wipe the fluids from his face. Kotaro's face blurred by the alcohol. You don't look familiar. Are you new to the staff? Very new. Let's talk about the swords. Then I'll consider helping you or killing you, said Kotaro. Who the hell are you? Security! His protests were interrupted by Marion. See, I told you you'd be a complete ass about it, she said to Kotaro. She turned to Hearst. Darling, this is Mr. Kotaro. Just Kotaro. Kotaro is from the year 2050. Kotaro is a time traveler. I served the sword and the gathering of swords. He turned to Marion. Do you believe his story? Anything's possible. Probable? That's another thing, she said. It was obvious she was enjoying this particular riddle. So, Kotaro, what is it that brings you to this time and place? Asked Hearst. You're considering a vacation home in these hills. We will make you a man of many riches. All we ask in return is to let us hide our swords here until the days they should be needed. What's this all about? Hearst asked. You remember the dagger that killed Julius Caesar? Kotaro vibrated with intensity. Anecdotally, She's looking for us. We are seven swords with almost unlimited power, and yet we quail before her. She is a warrior, but a merciless one. The businessman at Hearst was a few clicks ahead of his guest. Should we get the U.S. government involved? I think you will agree with me that if we do that, we won't see a penny, and I'll be locked up in some dungeon somewhere. Pictures from the future. Can you give me some can't lose investments? She could see the possibilities floating across Hearst's face. He held up a single digit. That's one for proof. Anybody can predict a single horse in a single race. That's not proof. I trifecta them. Go call your bookie and get to work. I will see you in 2 days' time. Charles vanished. Marion was beside herself watching William's facial expression change rapidly from disbelief to amazement to acceptance as he analyzed the implications of this embracement. She knew he would come to accept it. If he was wrong, the bum would be escorted off the property. But if he was right, oh man, that story would sell lots of newspapers in Los Angeles to London. She wandered into William's study where he was trying to reach his office. I need a newsreel crew on Wednesday, first thing, he insisted. That's 3 hours up, 3 hours back, plus camera time, makes it a full day, said Block, who just arrived to look at the seaside property Hearst had managed to buy for pennies on the dollar. His cameraman, Carmine, arrived 4 hours later in the Model A, camera equipment crammed into the jump seat. His hair was tangled because somewhere in the past 50 miles, he had lost his cap. But it was a bright, shiny day, and that was okay. A couple of hours real work, he was on his way, windshield time, not real work, was going to pay for his day in the boonies. Sorry, I missed a couple of turns. The streets aren't very well marked out here, are they? Hearst pointed to the promontory where he stood or sat, contemplating the horizon of the sky meets the sea. Young man, we need to capture for posterity the moment when Mr. Kitaro emerges from another timeline into our own. Hearst wandered off to instruct the still photographer on where to focus. Pardon my diagnosis. He's playing me with a hoot, isn't it? He asked Marion. That remains to be seen, she had smiled. On Wednesday at 4 p.m., Hearst, Marion, and Carmine were poised to capture the moment. In a moment of bright light that blinded the guitar on line, sword in hand. Carmine cranked the camera and wished the angle wasn't so sharp, the light playing with his ability to photograph the channel that opened between two worlds. Marion held out a glass of champagne. Guitar, surely you must have a cocktail where you come from. Carmine stumbled between them. I can't see, I'm blind. Guitar suggested. Sit a moment, relax your nerves. Sight will return. Carmine sat on the floor until his eyes adjusted. William bounded up to them. Oh, good, you're here. Which reminds me of a condition of this contract, said Guitar. He walked over to the camera and stomped on it. No record of this must endure, or she will know our weakness when we meet her last. Hey, Chinaman, yelled Carmine, that's property of Hearst Enterprise. They're going to pay for that. Because I already have. Guitar turned to Hearst. You were sworn to secrecy, and in return, we will give you one tip every year that will keep you wealthy, far beyond what we saw as your potential. What do you vote for me? Asked Hearst. We need a fortress, a castle. Come with me. No one else must know the details at a risk to themselves, this nation, this planet. It is written that the seven swords of San Simeon must unite to fight and defeat the dagger of Rome.
Wow. That's I hope you have the next Lord of the Rings series. I think that's even more than that though. There's Lord of the Rings stuff in there, but there's also a lot of sci-fi. It's time traveling, all that stuff. That's very interesting. Very interesting. I can't wait to read that book.
Thanks.
Well, and like I said before, you are obviously a very, very busy person. You do a lot of things. What time do you have for? Do you have any time for other pursuits like hobbies, teaching? What else do you do?
Well, like I said, I really want to teach the concepts in that book, and I'm very involved with KPFK, the radio station that is here in LA. There are 5 stations that belong to the Pacifica Network. There's one in New York, one in Washington, D.C., one in Houston, and 2 here in California, one up in the Bay Area, and this one in Los Angeles. And we're doing so much to help the station regain its footing in the Los Angeles market. And every day is a new challenge, and it's fun. And when it stops being fun, I guess I'll move on to something else.
What's an iconic radio station? I mean, you brought the past into the present, with us, and you represent book authors, keeping your finger on the pulse of politics, local, at the state level, and now at the international level. Doing all that, when do you plan to retire, man?
believe it or not, this is retirement. But anything I can do to widen the discussion about things that are going on in the world and about different forms of fiction that excite people. The more I feel like retirement's for people who want to lay down and die. I don't have time for that.
I hope I have the energy you do when I get to your age. So I get to say you do a lot. You're a very busy person.
Thank you.
How can people reach you?
I've got this TikTok channel, as I mentioned, with over 60 videos. Invite people to look at that stuff. YouTube, where this is going to be a broadcast, and I've got my email where if you want to get on my newsletter, write to writingbiz@yahoo.com. That's WRITINGBIZ@yahoo.com. And I'd love to hear from readers and from people who just want to engage. I get my ideas and my energy from people that I engage with, like my friend Joe.
I think with that, when this was supposed to go 3 hours, we didn't quite make the 3 hour mark. We're about the 2 hour, 20-minute mark.
Wow.
But I'll tell you why that is, Dan. When you and I start talking, we become very animated. We kind of become very clipped, and we kind of like, because we've known each other so long, we do shorthand.
Yeah.
That's not good for podcasts necessarily, but it's great for us because I mean it does show our history and the time that we spent together. We really do kind of read each other's minds a lot. So, but I have enjoyed this almost 3 hours that we spent with author Dan McCrory, author of Capitalism Killed the Middle Class, 25 Ways the System is Rigged Against You, and his novel You Will Forever Be My Always, along with the other many other books that are works in progress that Dan has right now. Can't wait to see them. I'm going to tell you, it's just they always. Well, I've read everything you've written. Always blows my mind. You've got a very insightful mind and a very creative mind as well. So I'm very proud of the fact that I can call you friend and just been an awesome ride with you. So,
well, it's interesting because I was told when I got Parkinson's that there was going to be all these medicines I had to take, and one morning I woke up at 2:00 in the morning with an idea for another story. So I got to jot it down. I said, "What is going on? Why is this happening?" And I Googled right then and there creativity and Parkinson's disease. And I found out that one of the medicines I take actually is in a study that was found to increase creativity in 20% of the people that take that particular med. So that's my silver lining to my dark cloud, and I'm going to hang on to that as long as I can.
Apparently, it's working. So I mean, yeah, again, you're very prolific. And you haven't been writing for 25 years. It's been a fairly short period of time that you've been really invested in the publishing of the works. And the background did have decades of decades of background.
I started writing when I was 11 years old.
Really. Yeah. But it's this latest spate of writing is really kind of like taking a whole new life.
When I retired, I realized I now have the opportunity to do what I wanted to do with my life, and this is what I want to do with the rest of my life.
Well, I'm proud of you for doing it. You're like I said, you're an amazing person, and not just an author, but somebody I consider. I'm grateful to be your friend, and yeah, it's always a pleasure. Well, as I said, we didn't quite get to the 3 hour mark, but we did have a lot to say, and Dan has an amazing repertoire of knowledge and history. So once again, I'm Joe Ayala, author Dan McCrory. And we hope you've enjoyed your 2 hours and 30 minutes with us. If you want more information, Dan already gave us where to reach him at, but can you do it one more time, Dan? Let us know.
There's, as I said, I've also, if you Google my name, you'll Google, say, my name and podcast, you'll see all the podcasts, the 50 odd podcasts I've done in the US, where else? UK, Australia, India, and Nigeria. All sorts of interesting conversations that I have with people around the world. And but you can always email me at writingbiz@yahoo.com. That's WRITINGBIZ@yahoo.com. And say, hey, put me on your mailing list. That goes out to about 800 people around the country, and wasn't for my friend in Australia, Reese Joseph, I probably wouldn't put out the newsletter or I would forget it until about halfway through the month. He's right there on day one saying, where's your newsletter? So
We gotta get it out there.
exactly.
Thank you, Dan. Thank you.
Thank you.
Once again, my name is Joe Ayala. This is Author Dan McCrory. Thank you so much for tuning in.
Thank you.